Thank you very much. Real pleasure to be here. I appreciate everybody's time to attend this webinar. As it was discussed, we're going to look at the India tractor market, really predominantly around the voice of the farmer, and look at some trends and also a bit of a longer-term view of where we see that market going. I've also got my colleague ETAuto here. She may be coming in when we have questions at the end, but certainly if you have any questions during the presentation, just drop a note to us and we'll keep a track of that as we go through. Just a bit of a background. Myself and Yukti have been conducting tractor studies or working in the agricultural industry for a number of years. Not just in India, but in Southeast Asia, Europe, and North America. But this time we're really focusing on the India market, which is such a dynamic and growing market. So within today, we're looking at four really key areas. One is really looking at what the tractor market is today and a bit of its long-term outlook. We'll also be looking at what customer requirements are out there. It is a moving market as India is developing so fast. Rural India and farmers themselves are beginning to kind of reach out with questions about the product that are pushing OEMs to consider changing, altering, and really improving the service and quality they get. So we'll focus a little bit on the key areas that we think are important for OEMs and what is needed to meet those customer needs. Our third one is really looking at some kind of overall changes in rural India for the farmer and how we think that will impact their view in terms of the tractor market. And then finally, we'll just touch on some of the priorities which we think are important for the market in 2016 and 17. And then we open it up for questions. So to start off with, I mean, the first thing is, although the market is volatile in terms of overall sales globally, and this has been a decline over the last 2 years across key markets, it's key to see that when we look at overall sales in 2014, and this is publicly available data, we'll talk a little bit about more recent figures for India and Pacific. We see that India is strikingly a strong market in terms of retail sales. Sometimes it swaps with China as being really key, and China is increasing, and we know that particularly in the change in the farm sizes, reallocation of land in China, and growing HP segment requirements. India had a little bit of a dip based on the two, consecutively poor monsoons, but it is a very important market. It's an important market also, not just in respect of retail sales, but also for manufacturers. If we look at that smaller HP segment, under 100 HP, it's really an area that India dominates in terms of manufacturers, where you have Mahindra and you have Taffy with Eicher and Massey Ferguson. You've also got international players that have come in, John Deere, New Holland, that are very focused on using it both as an internal market for sales of these smaller utility tractors, but also importantly as an export base. Make in India is important, and these manufacturers are focused on that, as well as other players that have really grown and are really interesting to look at, like Sonalika International Tractors, really growing in terms of domestic sales in a declining market recently, but also in terms of where they're looking for export markets. I think also when you look at the Indian tractor market, you have to think about where are the opportunities outside. And some manufacturers have been able to dampen some domestic demand declines with looking at exports. And we've looked at it and really kind of see that markets which have requirements for smaller HP tractors, places like Turkey, Thailand. I think Thailand has about 50,000 units, not on this chart, but about 50,000 units this year in terms of retail sales, are attractive markets for exporters. Maghreb markets as well, Northern Africa, and even Eastern Africa, although difficult to enter these markets, show opportunities for Indian tractor manufacturers in the smaller HP segment. And without any doubt, you have to congratulate Indian manufacturers on being able to grow in North America, demanding customers in small HP segments, often seen as kind of hobby farmers, is something that Mahindra and other Indian manufacturers are head-to-head with Kubota and John Deere. So challenging markets, high requirements from customers is encouraging to see that. So overall, we see in terms of India as a tractor manufacturing market as very positive. One of the other things is the underlying fundamentals in the industry. These are really to do with things regarding actually how important agriculture is in the industry. There is a clear focus in respect of overall looking at India that accounts for limited GDP, around 17%, but 60% of people's livelihoods are around the farm from rural India. But when it comes to mechanization, and I'm sure the audience are very aware of that, India is lacking in that. And if we look at yield, if we look at kind of comparative markets in terms of farm sizes, we can see that the yield in India per hectare is much lower than, say, in China, Japan, or even Indonesia. So the need to really, with a growing population and the need to increase profitability and productivity for farmers requires that they do have to find the right implements, the right tractors to help them to improve their yield in terms of productivity and profitability. Underlining that, though, if we look at the crop value of production, we have seen declines in overall crop values across globally. It has declined and suppressed, but it's positively in the sense that it's stabilizing now. And we see that stabilization is also a good area for growth. But as we say, there's about 120 million farms in India. A large percentage of those are marginal and small farms. And the key thing is to help those farmers to get onto the ladder in terms of being able to use a tractor for mechanization, improvements in productivity, but also that they're able to access these tractors. And one of the interesting things recently in the market has been the growth of rentals and the availability to actually rent tractors through buying groups or just individual farmers that can rent it. And we've seen some interesting developments from Mahindra with Tringo, also VC Tillers and John Deere in Karnataka, looking at models where farmers can actually access tractors not just merely by purchasing them, obviously, but also by the ability to rent them for a shorter period at times that will require them. And I think that's an encouraging trend, and we're seeing that technology is also helping to develop that. But without any doubt, the key hurdle for any growth in India in terms of the tractor growth in retail domestic sales is the challenge of water. With 2 consecutive monsoons failing in large parts of India, it's put under tremendous pressure. The sustainability for some farms. So incomes have been stressed. The ability to really make a profit out of your farm or just to keep your head over water has been really challenging. We see that India has 17% of the world's population, but only has 4% of fresh water reserves. So the activities, and we saw that with Yateley in the union budget, the activities by the government to really start focusing more on improving irrigation, and that can be micro irrigation plans, which we've seen kind of drop water to the focus on improving productivity and collecting water in every means possible was very encouraging. And I understand 26 lakhs of hectares of India are now looked at in terms of improving in respect of irrigation projects. So how far that India can move in terms of holding on to the water reserves, not relying so much on groundwater, ensuring that irrigation is really improving across the country is key to helping really farmers in some of the really hot spots of the country to maintain proper productivity and yields. So as that develops over time, these irrigation projects we believe will improve retail sales of tractors. And just as a cursory look, it will also probably actually help the construction equipment too, the manufacturers who are providing backhoe loaders and tracked excavators and mini excavators. This is also growing in terms of highway projects and irrigation projects. And these areas of commercial usage as well are important for farmers when it comes to rental. So if we look at the kind of the key drivers, as you see on the chart, we looked at the India tractor domestic sales over the period 2006 to 2007, right up to 2015 to 16. Very strong performance in terms of overall volumes, and 2013-14 over 600,000 units. A very strong performance in terms of overall sales. It did decline in 14 to 15 because of monsoons, and again it was hit last year in terms of weak monsoons. But if we look underneath in terms of what we're seeing in the quarter performance, and these figures coming from CRISIL and the TMA, we see that quarter by quarter, from quarter 14, where it was 139,000 units, to the quarter, most recently this quarter, first quarter in 16, it's 105,000 units. So clearly it's a bit of a drop. But if we compare it to quarter 1 in 2015, which was 97, we can see quarter on quarter for the year it is increasing. And we understand that the market's looking to grow between 10 and 12% this year, obviously depending on the final monsoons level and ability to help farmers succeed. But we're encouraged that we will see growth. And I understand that OEMs are actually gearing up on this with their productivity and building more capacity and more supply in terms of what they expect to be an increased demand, which is encouraging for the industry. So from our perspective, the key drivers that are sitting there with India on the tractor requirements is very positive. Low penetration of tractors overall. We understand there's about 10 tractors to 1,000 people in India. The average is 19 to 1,000, so the growth potential is clearly there. Government support in terms of agriculture and rural development. We're seeing improvements in terms of what the government is doing, real strong infrastructure and irrigation projects to enhance the improvement of the farmer. There's crop assurance, although I understand that that's not been taken up by as many people as maybe was hoped, and sometimes the process of getting that insurance can be quite arduous. The confidence that there is some form of insurance can only help people maintain and stay in farming. Improvement in the credit environment is also really an encouragement. They're finding the financial models that really will help farmers, in other words, making sure that they're banked, making sure that they can get access to credit, and also the ability for subsidies to be quickly and efficiently provided to farmers to help them make that purchase of the tractor, I think is easing, or certainly we believe is easing and improving in the industry. Another thing, of course, on the other side is about the risk. So how can financial providers understand the risk of lending to a farmer? Determining actually how their crop is going to improve, understanding their history, financial history, which is often not there. All those elements, as the industry is improving in transparency and clarity about the financial situation of the farmer, also help in making sure that those loans from private organizations are more effectively managed. Scarcity of labor is something that we've seen across the globe. There's a couple of factors, and clearly in India this has been affected by some government policy, I believe NAGRA, and also the fact that people are not really looking at rural farming or farming per se as an occupation that they'd like to get involved in. Lifestyles and industrialization and urbanization means that people are looking for other things than farming. It's not as attractive a profession as previously seen, but also the pool of lower priced labor, particularly at key harvest or seasonal times, is not there as it used to be. So farmers are kind of being forced in a certain way to look at mechanization as a solution. They're looking at the cost of labor and seeing that actually maybe I can afford to buy that tractor or even a used tractor to avoid the higher labor costs. And that's something we see in Southeast Asia, South Asia, and other markets that are driving that. A combination of generational change and attitudes towards farming, where we see a lack of young people being interested in farming, and secondary, that the actual cost of labor is becoming quite prohibitive, forcing people to make that choice to actually have a tractor. So there's higher minimum wages we're seeing as an impact to drive up retail sales. Obviously, India's GDP is strong, and there's a beacon in terms of global performance just now. And we see as incomes increase, growth increases in the industry, then of course money in the pocket for consumers are there to buy more expensive, higher protein agricultural products, but also of course the whole drip down effect into rural India is going to be there, where people are having more money and ability to actually purchase. Increasing urbanization and growing middle class can increasingly show that there are actually also demands in terms of what I was saying in the amount and type of goods that people are buying, about what they want to see on their table, and that's going to help improve higher margins for farmers in certain staples. We've seen organic farming actually increasing in India, small base, but the more discerning middle class looking for certain things, and protein overall in terms of the diet is going to increase, putting more strain on agriculture, and that helping in terms of demand. And then finally, in respect of an expanding population, the need to have higher yields, higher productivity to feed a population which will be 1.6 billion predicted by 2015. This means that there is a need for India to be more productive, and there's a need to just improve the terms of mechanization that's in the market. Underlying this, of course, is the key thing is, how's the monsoon going to be? If the monsoon's good, and it's expected to be or forecast to be above average, then that's a very successful sign for the industry, and it's good for the farmers. So this is a key monitor as we talk about their needs. So how well are India manufacturers meeting those customer requirements? Well, what are those customer requirements? Just to touch on it, JD Power goes out and measures the voice of the customer across India in all kinds of industries, and from 2014 we started to go out and really get the voice of the farmer. And by that we mean we want to understand initially around how they are experiencing that tractor they own. So we went out and asked 3,800 farmers how satisfied they were with their tractor, the new tractor they bought. Well, in actual fact, we asked them about tractors they bought 12 to 24 months ago, because we wanted to move away from the honeymoon period when you just got a new machine to actually understand how does it work across the different seasons, how did the dealer support me, if there was breakdowns, what were the problems with the machine, and also increasingly how is the performance of the machine relative to their expectations. So we cover 14 states in India, and the choice of the 14 states is related to the sales in the market. So we're covering over 95% of tractor sales in India. We look at farmers' experiences from Tamil Nadu to Punjab and from east to west, and understanding in detail what their experience is. So this is the first time JD Power has been doing such a large study with tractor manufacturers' customers. We do it as an ad hoc basis in different markets, but this is the first time we've gone and done what we call a syndicated study, so we can report back to the market publicly what their people's top performances are, what are the key pain points for farmers with their tractors, and how important it is for tractor manufacturers to really support their farmers in terms of product and service. And I just want to talk a little bit about that. Clearly we're covering the key tractor brands in India, so if they have over 2% market share, we cover those tractor brands, and we're covering the key HP segments. Just to kind of re-emphasize India, as I said, is a small HP or utility tractor market, and that means that tractors between the sizes of 30 HP and 50 HP are really the dominant sales volumes for the industry. Small tractors under 30 HP is an important market, and we've seen developments there, as well as tractors over 50 HP is growing. But the key area is around 30 to 50 HPs, and we cover that across the study. So the first thing we want to know is how have things changed in terms of what farmers are looking at when they buy a tractor. What's the most important thing? We saw in this year that the most important element that's driving, we asked them about multiple different types of things that could be driving their choice. Pulling power was the most important. It's probably not a surprise. I mean, you're buying a product, it's a commercial product. It's about helping me make the best out of my farming business, so it's got to pull and do the job. And 60% of people said that that was one of the main reasons that they chose a tractor. Brand reputation, do I trust the brand? Am I familiar with the brand? Do I really understand that the brand is going to deliver for what I expect to do is 48%. Interesting, in a rural environment, word of mouth is so important. And we've been tracking that over the last 3 years, and we saw that word of mouth is about 46% of the reasons why people are choosing to buy a certain tractor brand. The role of the sarpanch, or the person that's responsible for the village, clearly has an important role, and it's not, as I would say, from a US perspective, where people would say, oh, we're in a red community or we're in a green community. In India, it's much more nuanced than that. It's about the relationship that they have with the brand, with the dealer in their local vicinity, how the support system is there in terms of parts, and they can be authorized parts or just availability of generic parts. Really, for tractor manufacturers to move into different parts of India is quite challenging. Because of some of the hurdles that there is in areas where they've been a certain model, a certain brand has really got a strong presence. So when we see that word of mouth is declining from 60% in 2014 to 46%, it kind of does flag up some interesting points. And I think it is clearly word of mouth is important, brand reputation is important, but we're also seeing that product features are becoming more interesting. So people are looking at the product in terms of its pulling power, which clearly is being marketed by OEMs very strongly. But they're looking at pulling power, they're looking at the product features more than they did in 2014. They're looking at fuel efficiency, which is really a hygiene factor, and it's often difficult for brands to really compete in fuel efficiency, because if I read the literature, everybody's saying that they've got the best fuel efficiency. It's really from the farmer's experience about that will determine it. And the other area which is important is ease of operation. Although it hasn't changed radically over the 3 years that we've been measuring it, we do see subtle changes in terms of ease of operation. And when we talk about it, we're talking about not just the movement of the tractor's radius and drivability, but we're also talking about the amount of effort that you have to be put in to change the hydraulics, the steering. In India, power steering wasn't always a common feature. Supported hydraulics weren't always there. Even the comfort of the seat, if you think about it, is quite a hard job to sit on a tractor all day. And if we're having farmers that are increasingly actually not using operators but doing it themselves because of labor shortages, and we're also seeing farmers that are probably spending more hours on the tractor than they have in previous times, simply by the fact that there is less labor, actual comfort, ease of working is becoming more important. But at 42% is an interesting one. Applications, we ask about what kind of applications. Now clearly for farming it's about ploughing and harvesting, it's about harrowing and cultivation. Another thing which is very unique, I think, in India is that Indian farmers are very pragmatic in their outlook. So they're looking for revenue streams that are going to work for them. And it's not going to be just in the farm. It can be land leveling. And as we see, about 18%, actually over 18% of farmers are saying that they're using their tractor for non-agricultural usage. Now it's important to notice that in this study, we are actually asking farmers about their tractor. We're not asking commercial tractor users, so they have to have bought the tractor for an agricultural purpose. So within that segment, 18% are saying they're using it for non-agricultural purposes. This is very interesting because for a manufacturer it means, well, you know, I've got to have a tractor that's more multi-purpose. I have to have a tractor that can be having a trolley fitted on it that can work for moving goods and moving people. It also has to be stable when you're roading it on the road, and it also has to have the traction when you're on the field. The other thing is that people are using it for, I would say, construction equipment or off-highway type of activities like leveling or industrial uses, leveling, digging, excavating, which raises a point from that tractor manufacturers if they want to put things like a backhoe onto the tractor, if they want to put a bigger bucket on the tractor, or if they're even looking at redesigning their tractors where there's a bit of a crossover between, let's say, a smaller backhoe loader and a tractor. It is changing, and as we say that labor costs are becoming higher, those machines are going to be more prevalent, we think, in the industry, kind of more niche machines that may have attachments connected to them or maybe specific about non-agricultural usage. Something to watch and something to look at over the years. When we look at sentiment, and one of the things we wanted to understand is when we measured the study, and we went out to farmers in August of last year and finished field work in January of this year, clearly quite a tough time for farmers in terms of the monsoon. We wanted to understand the sentiment. And one of the things we asked was to ask them how did they assess their present income from agriculture. 2015, only 8% of people said that they felt it was very unfavorable or unfavorable. Now this has nearly doubled this year to 15%. So farmers clearly were put under stress. What we also wanted to know is how are you looking at farming over the next couple of years, 2 to 3 years? Is it something that you think is going to improve? In 2015, optimism was much stronger there, and you know, the weather will change your opinion. But if it's been good, and it was, 76% of people said they expected it to improve, which was encouraging. It dropped to 61% in 2016. That means that people are seeing their income struggling a little bit. They're seeing the future of farming difficult. And if their sentiment or outlook is less positive, then of course their confidence to invest in a tractor is diminished. One of the income areas which is so important, we're talking about 18% of people using their tractors for non-agricultural purposes, is the revenue stream from rental. I talked about it earlier that we're seeing a change in the industry where manufacturers are coming to help in terms of providing mechanization to smaller farmers by providing rental solutions, which we certainly encourage and think that's a great idea to give access to farmers. But there is also a cohort of farmers that are very dependent on the rental income they get as single contractors, really, on their tractors. So one of the things that suppressed their income in our study from 2015 to this year was that 34% of people, so a third of people, said that they rented out their tractor. Now that could vary to the local farmer down the road, to somebody in the village, to actually running a pretty sizable income business from your tractor, but to 25% in 2016. Why this is important is really from our perspective is that when we look at farmers that just who rent out their tractor, we know that their overall income is about 80% of the average of what we see for non-rentals. So they really are more dependent on that as a source of income. So if the tractor breaks down, if there is issues in not being able to rent out that tractor, then it really does impact their overall incomes. And what we do see is that they become much more sensitive in terms of the quality of the product, in terms of the dealer service they get. And on average, we're seeing that, and it depends obviously on the HP segment. And here we're talking about all the HP segments in India, so from 15 to 100 in our study, or about 85 to be precise, is that overall the rates are around 400 to 800 rupees an hour. So if they're spending a lot of time renting it out, this is a sizable chunk of income for them. If that declines, then that clearly knocks their confidence and their ability to make a profit at the end of the year, or even pay for service of that tractor. So that taking a bear in mind, we also wanted to look at, well, what is the performance of the tractor in terms of the customer? What's really important in driving satisfaction? And we look at it in terms of an index model. And here I'm just showing you the index model at a top level. So we asked farmers, multiple questions around drivability, the engine, hydraulics, driving comfort, a whole plethora of areas about what they rate on a 10-point scale, one being totally unacceptable or unacceptable, 10 outstanding, 5 average. And we're usually looking at people who give ratings around about 7 to be satisfied, 8 highly satisfied, 9, 10 are kind of delighted customers. But each of those areas we put into a factor analysis or regression so we can understand what's driving it. So without going into the detail, what we can see is that when we look at overall performance of the tractor, we find out, and this is from the customer, that 50% of their satisfaction is driven by the machine's performance, its ability to do the job, and all the areas around doing that job. And 44% is about pure quality and reliability, the durability of that tractor. So we can look at those areas. We have 31 questions that we measure around all these different attributes of machine performance. We have one question about quality and reliability. We can look at those 10 machine performance attributes and look at, well, what are the ones that are really important to farmers? So these are not the pain points. These are not saying, oh, these are the ones that are causing the most issues. These are the ones that really have to be there, strongly performing for a tractor manufacturer to be high in terms of overall performance. So we see hydraulics and couplings being very important. So ease of connecting pipes, hydraulic lifting capacity. We see some models across India that are struggling in terms of lifting capacity. We've seen some new models that are really strong in that, and that's something that farmers are looking at. We see ease of using the 3-point hitch and also ease of controlling hydraulics, just about the accuracy and positioning. Again, that's also something to do with the ability to control your tractor and also not being too fatigued, actually. These are very important areas. Tires, if we get a dollar for every time somebody talks about how upset they're with the tires or how important tires are, we'd be very wealthy. Tires are really incredible. They're important for farmers. They are very visible, obviously. They're big ticket items, and if they go wrong, they are problematic. So durability of tires is the third most important thing for customers when they're buying a tractor in terms of their ratings. The traction of the original tires is also important, and we noticed in the study that sometimes manufacturers or dealers are not very good in informing customers about how to have the right implements to attach to the tractors, and that can cause overwear, it can cause instability, particularly on certain applications or even on roading. So tires are very important. And the other element is to look at is around leg room and seat comfort. Again, we were talking about how important now it is for comfort and ease, and really to avoid fatigue and tiredness for farmers on their tractors. They're becoming more critical of that. It's becoming more important, and we can see if you look at industry average to best in class, you can see that there is quite a gap there in terms of that. And we think that's one area, kind of battle area in terms of product improvement, is about the ease of operation, the comfort within the tractor. We also ask about problems. And we ask this because we ask people about their overall satisfaction with quality and reliability, but we want to know what is driving that rating. So it's the same thing, it's a 10-point scale. So if they give a 5, a 6, or 7, what is causing them to give that? Without going and boring you into the detail, we can show you the categories. So we have about, I think it's 88 different problems that we actually prompt the farmer and ask them, okay, on your tractor, have you experienced this issue? Brake problems, squeaky brakes, electrical defects, or batteries. We go into a lot of detail. And we report that back as what we call PP100. So that's problems per 100 machines. And if you look at the bottom of the chart, you see it says 245. So if we look at one tractor, one farmer, he's experiencing over a duration of 12 to 24 months about 2.5 or 2.45 problems on his tractor. The key highlight for us is these are not small problems. These are not little issues. These are not things that you might say are soft problems. Some of them are quite critical problems. And we have engine and transmission having the highest count and has grown to 80 problems, which is a concern with manufacturers. Are they having real problems with engine and transmission, core elements of the job, and why are they at 80? This also affects just generally India manufacturers when they think about exports. I mean, is this problem also going away and outside and being exported? Driving an operation, 49, we're talking about, the ability to really get the job done, and electrical. Electrical is always interesting because we know farmers being pragmatic individuals will try and repair electrical issues themselves. They might add a boom box, they might put in new lighting, and they might start working with the electric. So we don't know always if the problem is from a manufacturer, from a service engineer, or even customer related problems, but we do know exactly what those type of electrical problems are, but it's 40. So the number of problems reported has increased this year, and that is for us a concern. Also, breakdowns have increased. So we see that breakdowns in 2015 was 14%, and it's now gone up to 19%. We think about the importance of rental for some farmers. Clearly, a breakdown is going to stop your revenue. If you're renting, it's also going to cause you penalties. If you've rented it out and a breakdown, it's just added cost. And if it's an important time in the harvest or a period of preparing land, then clearly that's also an issue. So in the study, we not only look at the product and the quality, the product performance quality, we also want to know is how good is the dealer network there from the OEM level to support the farmer. And if we look at it on an index level, and thinking that we use a 1,000-point scale, where 1,000 is the very, very top of performance and 100 is the very lowest, we see that in 2016, overall service, and we're asking about the service experience for routine maintenance and repairs, as well as parts operation, we've seen it's declined. So the dealer network is not supporting the farmer as well as they were doing in the previous year. We're seeing that they're not doing that in the service that they provide, after sales service, and critically they're not providing that in the parts operation. And parts operation will go into more detail. We're also seeing that from a farmer's perspective, if you think about your car, if you have a car or a two-wheeler, it's often that the dealer is very keen to contact you to bring you back in for a service, routine maintenance. They want to bring you in. It's called absorption ratios. They want to get that money for the service. They also want to make sure from a manufacturer's perspective that the car is maintained, the bike is maintained, it's not going to break down, you're not going to think about the problems related to the lack of maintenance as being a problem from manufacturing. It's not. So it's very important to proactively reach out. And what we see in the study is that we ask farmers now, when you arranged your maintenance, service maintenance, did you contact the dealer? Or did the dealer proactively contact you? And in the study, we see only 13% of dealers are proactively going out and contacting their customers, which is actually quite derisory. Because it means that they're not going out to make sure that the farmer's machine is not going to break down, is preventative servicing. They're also doing not doing that to make sure that they're in contact with the farmer who is already in stress in terms of probably his profitability, but does have to maintain his tractor. So they may have to think about different finance options, but ways to ensure that they still service their tractors. And we see satisfaction is much higher there. You know, I visited the dealer, so it means that I have to go to the dealer. 47% or 53% say I have to phone the customer. Is not so strong for this industry. We also asked about price. Clearly, people had a better price, about 12%. You know, much more satisfied. These differences, 54.3 minus 82, is looking upon that 1,000-point scale. Even though they look marginal differences, actually they're quite significant when we look at satisfaction overall, because people are mainly scoring between 700 and 800. So this is the variance that we're seeing within that. The other thing is we're talking about parts is parts availability is really important. So if my tractor's broken down, and we've seen it has grown in the number of breakdowns, is how much inventory, how much ability is it for the dealer to get that part for me. And we measure parts in terms of authorized parts. And we saw that 43% of customers in 2015 said they could get it on the same day. That dropped down to 35% this year. We also see that the amount of parts available, about 70%, we say. You know, would you say about 70% of your parts, fast-moving parts, are available? And we're talking, again, just about authorized parts, not about parts that you can find in the local market, generic parts. That's dropped availability, so dropped, and they feel only 43% of people feel they have about 70% availability at the dealer. So the dealer, again, there is not supporting in terms of the supply chain. So when they rate their overall experience with the dealer, we've seen that delighted box, and the delighted box is when they give 10 out of 10, it's dropped from 13% of people giving 10 out of 10 for the dealer to 9%. So clearly the dealer has some role to play in supporting the farmers more. Dealer goes out of his way to help you. We asked some questions on the dealer attitude, has dropped to 43% of people fully agreeing. Dealer stands behind the products and services provided, dropped to 44%. This is actually a very critical element in India where relationships are very strong. Farmers already have a very strong relationship with their dealer in terms of finance, in terms of support during the different seasons. But that drop is notable. So when we look at that, we have to say to ourselves, you know, dealer satisfaction has dropped, and also we've seen product quality decline. Clearly within a negative sentiment in the market, but areas where the OEM really needs to support. So how do we look at it with the few minutes we've got left here, another 10 minutes I think really, is how do we see rural India changing? From an outside perspective, and somebody that visits India regularly, and I've been doing that for the last 10 years, I mean, without any doubt, you can see that infrastructure is moving into rural India. Roads are improving. You have a policy of, you know, getting electricity to the last, I think, 18,000 villages. Make sure 300 million people have now got electricity. Incomes are improving. Some farmers in parts of India, even with those 2 bad monsoons, are quite successful. So their changing lifestyle is being affected, as well as their families are moving off and doing different things. So when we look at some key areas, you know, do you own a house? Tractor owners have and own their house, 99.5%. Importantly, smartphones and mobile phones, that connectivity, the ability for the dealer to contact the customer, the ability for the customer to actually go shopping around for different products and features has increased, certainly as 3G and 4G increases its penetration into rural India. Two-wheelers are there, TVs are high, and also car. Car is about 7% of the population of tractor owners say they have a car. Like India, Maruti Suzuki very strong, 44%, Tata, Mahindra. I only raised the point really on the car manufacturer because if people are familiar with JD Power studies, they also know that Maruti Suzuki has won I think over 16 years in a row, the CSI, or Customer Service Study, Customer Service Index Study. Now, they don't just win it by a margin, they win it by a very large margin. They win it by a score over 900 index points. And if we take it into contrast of what we've seen with the farmer and the dealer, how their satisfaction score is for service, clearly a different industry, different needs, but some of those customers are already being serviced by high-performing dealers. And in fact, Tata, Mahindra, Hyundai all perform well in J.D. Power's CSI study. So they're touching brands daily, or at least every time they have a service, every 6 months. They're talking to brands that are performing at a high level in terms of how they are satisfying them in their service that they get. We also know that the OEM brands are moving fast and furiously to grow rural India. This data is from 2013, just going to give you an indication. Maruti, they have their e-outlets, Hyundai, Mahindra, and Hero are all seeing growth in the rural activities, and as they're spreading in there, it's an important growth area. And as customers experience more cars, they're sharing cars, they're going in cars, they get used to things like power steering, they get used to comfortable seats, they get used to mobile phone chargers, they get used to air conditioning. Not to say that we think there's going to be a revolution in the amount of cabs that are sitting on tractors, but it's just one of the areas where farmers will be starting to look out as they become more product literate about the different areas and different product features that the manufacturers are providing. And they will look at their tractor manufacturer and also have questions about, does it have these features, some of these features that are relevant. The other element which we think is so interesting in rural India is the growth of mobile, particularly 3G and 4G. So we've seen smartphone penetration growing in India, outstripping other markets, far from being at a high level. So the growth is significant. What is also significant is the access. So it's not an expensive smartphone. You have a lot of Chinese and Indian manufacturers there that are coming into the market with cheaper smartphones, some of them around 3,000 rupees, that can really empower farmers all kinds of levels in terms of getting access to the internet, getting information that the OEM can provide them, the dealer can provide them, and also governments. So we see that with the government moving forward to provide farmers really empowerment, giving them advice about what can they do with apps, what they can do with in terms of soil health, when's the best time to plant or harvest. They can also provide them with market prices, guidance on subsidies, as well as the private sector providing information on funding, as well as the dealer giving an update. Instead of phoning the dealer for service, the dealer can text me, the dealer can give me information about a parts campaign, he can give me information about when my part is available. So it's empowering farmers, mobile technology, and it really is changing them. It's also opening a perspective where they will start shopping around more. We probably will see that recommendation still important, but declining as product features and the ability to navigate around the market is going to be more important in terms of the global internet market. So in terms of changing rural India, what we do see is, as I was saying, improved infrastructure, so in situ changes, things that are happening now, increased access to financial services, higher smartphone penetration is really empowering farmers, and greater government support and emphasis really from the Modi to push forward in terms of improvements. We're seeing greater mobility in terms of external influences. We're seeing, as I say, families are moving to urban areas, families are getting educated outside of traditional areas, coming back with information. Car ownership is increasing. We're seeing an importance of, the diaspora or the Indians abroad coming back with ideas and suggestions and able to tap into the internet or to give them examples from life outside of their particular village. We're seeing that increased digital connectivity, which I think is so important. Brands are picking up on that. There's talking of Uber rental of tractors, from people like Mahindra, as we talked about, or VC Tillers, that mobile ability to get information, and greater overall product and service expectations. People are touching different products, that are touching different experiences, and their expectations will increase. So how do we see our priorities for the tractor industry? Well, I think just to summarize it, the first thing is we do see that there is a need to improve quality. We've seen a drop in that. We've seen that there is issues around what I would call core competencies, engine and transmission, needs to be improved. They need to introduce new models in terms of improvement in the machine performance or the workstation or the comfort of the tractor. Also, as we pointed out with rental and the use of non-agricultural commercial usage, some additional attachments on the tractor or different tractor hybrids that can move into infrastructure or industrial commercial usages. Develop technologies, in other words, start looking at things that really can help the farmer in terms of improving their knowledge on crop technology, crop procedures, for the ability to use that mobile connectivity to really enhance things. So using digital proactively. It might be in a nascent stage just now, but knowing the way that Indian farmers will pick up on things that are of advantage to them, it should grow, and those who are ahead of that should have the benefit. Also develop new finance and rental solutions. We're seeing that this is really interesting what's coming from the manufacturers and providing solutions for the rental model, but this is for them to rent out their products. We also have to think about what happens to the farmer who's got a tractor and needs that income from his own rental business. Can we use technology to find a solution for that? Can we find finance solutions that are going to aid farmers to get onto the mechanization route better? And I think you can do that with the use of digital and more transparency and banked community. And then fundamental things. We saw a supply chain issue. Supply chain in respect of that the dealer wasn't having a high enough inventory, and we're talking again about authorized parts. How it is in the local market will be different. But we had the feeling that when a downturn happens, instead of the dealer kind of ramping up and saying, I want to make sure that my customers are looked after, I may have to take a bit of a pain during this period, but this is the critical element to engage with my customers. We didn't see that. We saw more of a disengagement from the dealer network. We see that as being, reflective of their own financial concerns, and service may not be such a strong income pool than it is in automotive or construction equipment. But somehow the dealers have to provide that better service to the farmers and proactively. So that's what we're saying finally, is a proactive reach out to farmers. They're looking at different industries, they're experiencing different things from consumer products as well, industrial products, and the industry really needs to support them further. They're doing some really good jobs there, but we believe that there's a lot of areas for improvement. So that's our snapshot from J.D. Power's perspective. I hope that was informative, or certainly kind of raised some questions. We're now at the stage to actually look at some of your questions with the last few minutes. So just bear with me as we just read your questions through, and we'll try and respond. Do you have any questions, Matt? Yes. Yeah, so one of the questions I have is about if we could throw some more light on the rental model by some players in India. I talked about that a little bit. So really what we're seeing is that Mahindra's launched Tringo and is moving through there, investing a lot. I understand that's an aggregator model as well as providing ability for dealers to be involved in that, I think, to a certain degree. I'm not an expert on that area. But they're not the only one doing that. We also know that VCT Tillers has been involved in Karnataka in some state-focused funding on that, and I think the state's providing some funding towards opening up centers across the state to provide exactly that, so that farmers can come and access those products. They're not only just VC tillers, and I think the idea is to provide a base maybe with VCT tillers, or I mean John Deere is doing the same thing, but also provide other products. So it could be walk behind tillers or harvesters and things like that. So the product range is increasing, and the key thing, and I think this is very encouraging, is give the farmer the ability to use machinery and help them when they require it for a few hours, for a few days. So we're seeing that growing. It's a bit like the sharing community overall. If we see that across the world, people are using technology, and Uber is one of the platforms that's been used to really use technology to try and connect with customers, connect with rental companies, and building that together. So very, very interesting. So another question we have, is there any trend in India that demand for higher HP tractors will increase? If so, when? That's a very good question. I would say that we are seeing some growth in that from our understanding. In actual fact, we're seeing some growth in terms of requests for cabs. Cabs is something that we didn't think Indian farmers would be willing to pay for, but that's beginning to grow. The increase in HP will always be dependent on the size of the farm and how the farm is organized. So we don't think it's going to ramp up extensively large, although we're not a forecasting company, but we do think it will increase, but moderately. It's not going to be a runaway thing. So really the 30 to 50 HP segments is still the important one. I have a question about, will Euro norms going to affect the auto parts for tractors? I think from our perspective, we are seeing that some of the norms that are in Europe and North America are moving their way into South Asia and also Southeast Asia, but it's a slower process. So emission norms will be picked up over time. I think environmental issues are becoming more important, as well as just the importance of maintaining certain product norms and requirements and specifications. But as I say, we're not 100% sure about how that's moving. Just looking at other questions here. Asked about, has there been any study done on the size of rice transplanters in ASEAN and Chinese markets and how these evolved? Yeah, actually we do look at this market in, we look at it in Thailand, and we've also touched it in China. This is a growth market in terms of that. I think there's two things actually. We see growth with respect to changes. Rice transplanters growing as mechanization is important in smaller units, and we see some Asian players becoming quite attracted by the opportunities in India too. We also see sugarcane as being an important growth market for some manufacturers, but we'll see how that develops over time. So my final question, I just think with the last few minutes, we have a question on government focusing on doubling farmers' income by 2022. For this, it needs to reduce cost of production. How do tractors can contribute to this? You know, how can tractors contribute to improving farmers' income? It's quite clearly a trade-off, so they have to understand the cost of buying that tractor, or the EMI of that tractor, and in terms of what kind of yield, increased productivity they can get. I think it's interesting in respect of the fact that labor costs are increasing. So farmers have to make the calculation about, when they have a tractor, how much labor costs will they be saving, how much is their productivity and yield going to increase, how much can they do per hour versus what they could do maybe manually, as well as look at, and this is going back to the rental model, do I buy or do I rent? And how flexible is that? It's certainly a very positive thing that the government is focusing on improving that, because there's a demand in India with the growing population and really sometimes very difficult circumstances for farmers when it comes to relying on rain. The monsoon's important, but irrigation will help, improved irrigation. That focus around improving stability of the farmer's income is really important and will help India grow not only in performing and supporting its domestic needs, but also exporting, which is really important. So I think with that, I'd just like to thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your questions, and we hope you found it valuable.